Welcome back to another episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. I'm your host, Kylie Como. I'm the in-house legal nurse consultant here at Shane Smith Law. And today, I'm joined again by Paula Walters, founder of The Courageous Survivor and PD Walters Speaking. Paula, it's good to be with you again today.
Thank you. I'm excited to have another conversation with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, same. Me too. So again, for our audience, our focus here is always, brain injury and everything related. Let's get to it. I hope you guys were able to join us for our first discussion. If not, pause here and go back and listen to it. It was amazing. Paula kind of gives us a rundown of her story, and you not want to miss that. Today, we're going to jump in and dig into trauma, domestic violence, and kind of that intersection between those and brain injury. So, Paula, let's kick it off. Can you kind of speak to that intersection of trauma, domestic violence, and brain injury in general?
So, we look at domestic violence and we know it happens so often. So 1 out of 3 women, and then statistically, depending on where you look, 1 in 4 up to 1 in 7 men. So, we're talking about a very prevalent problem. The problem with that is it doesn't just go there. You take and you add on the strangulation piece, which, when you're looking at the Ohio Domestic Violence Network statistics, they're talking about of domestic violence survivors, up to 86% of those being strangled. So here's the problem with the strangulation piece is you have 50% of strangulation victims have no symptoms or no signs whatsoever. So there's no bruising, there's no swelling, there's no redness, there's no nothing. Wow. So they can have this anoxic injury, kind of mirroring a stroke symptoms and not want to even consider going to the hospital because there's nothing to see. That's one of the things we talk about when we do those trainings is these people will start having these symptoms, but because there was nothing for them to see, they won't go seek medical treatment. Not just the medical component of that, but then there's also the legal component of it, of being able to hold the abusers accountable because there are no signs or symptoms. When you start talking about, women who have hits to the head, women and men who have hits to the head, they're being slammed up against walls, they're having hands put around their throat, so blocking, blood to the brain, that becomes very dangerous, and it starts causing these invisible injuries that look like the concussions. Unfortunately, domestic violence victims don't have what NFL players have to be able to take a timeout and say, hey, let's go get a neurological exam, right, and then you can go back in if you're okay. These happen day in and day out multiple times, and they're not getting a break. And one of the things that the docs at the Neural Connection have kind of taught me about my injuries is when you're in a domestic violence incident and you have those head injuries and then you turn around and you get them the next day or a week later, there hasn't been that brain that's able to kind of heal, and it's taking another hit. And that even adds extra layers, and that can kind of show up later. And maybe that's why I keep having problems being able to get those new neural pathways, because the injuries are so deep. So it's just a big, heavy subject. And it's not just the physical stuff that goes unseen, but there's also the psychological part that's going on in the brain as well. So it's a very complicated subject for domestic violence victims and those who serve that population.
Yeah, you're right. There's so much we could dig into there. So I think brain injury, how does that brain injury add that extra layer? You said it, it's complex. So it adds, when you're talking about recovery from trauma, but you've got this underlying brain injury, along with the emotional components that you're trying to recover. How does that all work together?
We know that with brain injury, a lot of times there's this emotional regulation piece. There's, it impacts the memory, it impacts sleeping, executive function. So you have these domestic violence survivors having to kind of navigate going to the doctors, trying to figure out why they're having all these symptoms and be an advocate for themselves and not believing and filling out forms and being able to, follow directions and having to take all these tests because they often get lost in the medical system, much like I did. But now they're facing, they're always tired. They can't think straight because there's this brain injury component there that they're not even aware of, because they live these head injuries in this strangulation so frequently that it's just another day. They just don't have access to care as well. So how are they supposed to, one of my biggest frustration part, and I just talked about this in front of doctors, was a lot of times survivors have that abuser with them. How can they possibly talk to the neurologist, the cardiologist, the whoever about these injuries, even if they're aware that they could cause them problems, medical or mental health problems? How can they bring it up? Because we all know that they keep, abusers like to keep them under their thumb. Mm-hmm. So they're always there. And so, I mean, it's truly complicated, and it requires a lot of patience and understanding and being able to get specialized care, all of which survivors don't have a lot of access to.
I know these days, maybe 20 years ago was a little different. These days, especially in larger, urban centers, I think you have more of those specialists. Like I have a member of my family who's a SANE nurse, right? And so she's trained to look for some of these kind of hidden signs. Even as a bedside nurse myself, when we're doing our, admission assessment, if you will, one of the question sections does get into domestic violence and sexual violence. And we're supposed to, remove everybody from the room and ask those questions alone. But I've seen it happen more than I'd like, where, the person who comes with them stays in the room for whatever reason. And it may be, their opposite sex partner and potential abuser. And that's unfortunate. I think we've gotten better, and we're getting better at putting into place processes that make sure those kinds of things don't happen, and we can get to patients and get them where they need to be to hopefully feel safe enough to say the things that they need to say and get the help they need to get. But we've got a long way to go, I think, especially as you get further away from kind of bigger cities and bigger healthcare systems, unfortunately. But we're getting there. So that's a great rundown of kind of that complexity there. So misconceptions. I kind of dug into it there. There's some wrong approaches we take. There's a lot of misconceptions about brain injuries, especially in survivors of abuse, right? I've seen it a lot. You don't have to have a direct hit to the head to have a brain injury. You can just, like shaken baby syndrome. You can have, as an adult, a shaken type syndrome as well and sustain a significant brain injury. So what are some of those misconceptions about brain injury and survivors of abuse?
Well, I think that for survivors, that just because the bruises aren't there or the bruises don't look bad, like you may have the same old bruises that you always have, that black eye, those things, but you don't see what's going on underneath that. And I think that that's number one, is brain injury and injuries to the brain can happen from those hits. It doesn't have to be sports or just car accidents. And a lot of times, well, I look fine, or they look fine. I can't tell you how many people, I often will leave out the part when I'm speaking about my brain injury till the end. And people will say, but you look so good. Like, I didn't notice anything. Well, of course you didn't, because I know, one, I've worked very hard at getting my brain health back, but two, if you know what you're looking for, you can tell that I have the brain injury. There are the deficits there. I just know how to kind of mask them a little bit better. Yeah. And that's one of the things that survivors automatically do. We're used to putting on the happy face, being able to compensate and make everything look like it's just fine, even when it's, that we have that bad headache or we have that bad balance. We'll just kind of give it another name or give an excuse for it. And that a lot of times, the misconceptions, so like the people being impulsive, they'll say like, she's just so chaotic, or she's so emotional. Like I heard that, you're so emotional. It's not that I was emotional, it was that brain injury symptom, because that's one of the first things that shows up when when I'm sick or when I'm fatigued or when I kind of have something going on in the brain, is just that mental health part. But they want to say, the mental health, she's emotional, the depression, they can be more than just those mental health diagnoses. They can very well be rooted in brain injury. And I think that we have to stop having that, well, what's wrong with her? And maybe kind of have that conversation of what has happened to her. Yeah,
I think that emotional ability or even the opposite end, where you have that, they just want to be left alone. They want to be isolated right now. They may need some you may need some downtime, right, to do a little recharging, but you don't want to be abandoned, right? You still need that support support and encouragement. So yeah, those are great points that you bring up. Obviously, you are a consummate advocate for brain injury, especially when we're talking about in the context of domestic violence. So as that advocate, what would you tell others who are maybe in your shoes to how to advocate for themselves, especially when you're talking about in a complicated and sometimes seemingly uncaring medical and legal system?
So I tell people all the time, document everything. And I know that sometimes it is very hard to keep documentation when you're in an abusive relationship. There are apps out there that you can use that can be hidden in under a calculator in your phone and stuff like that. There are different apps and ways to do it. I journal on my phone and writing. I do them in both places, but I very much document like everything that happened, everything that happens to me. So even as a paramedic, if I get a new hit to the head, I put, like what I was feeling, like what happened, what I'm feeling, just because it could lead into another setback for myself. But like everything, symptoms, history of abuse, and then just really ask and advocate for yourself with your primary care. Specifically say, like, can I have a brain injury evaluation? Especially if you've had a strangulation or there's been multiple hits to the head and you're having those medical diagnosis or mental health diagnosis that you're being given medications and they can't find what's wrong for you. Ask for that. Yes. Bring support people. So I have a hard time being thrown information, and I'm sitting there in my short-term memory that's one of my struggles. So yes. When I go to the doctor, I either bring support people. If I can't get that, I ask if I can record the conversation so that I can make sure I get the opportunity to process it later. And people have really been good with that. And it's just asking for that. And I do it with all appointments. The other thing is for me, I am a morning person. I think that as brain injury people often have different times of the days that they're good, their brain functions better. I always ask for morning appointments. If I'm going to do a podcast, if I'm going to go to a doctor or speaking engagement, I always ask for morning because I know as the day goes on that I start feeling less and less and less myself and I'm more fatigued and less clear thinking. So if you have that, forms like doing things over the computer are difficult for some people, ask for a written form. Just don't be afraid to ask for things that better help and suit yourself. And then the other thing is there's a lot of resources that advocates have. Reach out to, your local support with your advocates. They have a lot of information for DV and TBI. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of state agencies that have brain injury associations. Reach out to them and just kind of like, I know, for instance, the Ohio Domestic Violence Network has a whole big part on their website specifically around brain injury and domestic violence with lots of resources to go and look at symptoms and being able to journal, looking for those things and kind of just being an advocate for yourself and keeping track of that stuff so that when you do get in front of that medical person, you can kind of be like, no, here's what I have. Here's what I've seen for the last 6 months.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned journaling. I mean, just looking for trends, right? Especially with short-term memory, you can't think to remember all of the things you experience throughout any given day over days, weeks, months at a time. So jotting that down, putting that in a note in your phone, that's a great idea. And then bringing those to, whether it's your medical professional, but I like that you mentioned the advocates that are out there. We live in a day and age of the internet, right? I mean, there's information at our fingertips. So it's there. It just takes that first step to reach out and find what's around you and having people like you present and available to share your journey is just key. So that is fantastic. So again, kind of thinking it from my perspective as someone on the medical legal side of things, how can we better support survivors who might have an undiagnosed brain injury?
Training, like getting trained on DV related brain injuries. We know like all brain injuries are uniquely different, but I think that there is an extra layer for survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, and stuff like that, because there is the trauma piece with it. So those impacts of trauma and being able to ask people about head injury and strangulation. Have you been hit in the head, or has anybody ever put anything around your neck? I tell people, stop asking, have you been choked? Because choked does not sound bad to and strangulation sounds like, I used to equate strangulation with death. I usually just ask people as a paramedic, and when I talk to survivors, has anyone put anything ever around your neck? So just kind of making it very simple for them, being really patient with the memory and communication struggles. And I know that this is really hard, but because I understand about last minute cancellations and stuff like that, but people who don't show up to, their legal appointment or their medical appointment, sometimes it's not that they're being non-compliant or they're just, disregarding your time, but they may have forgotten, or they may just have woke up and their symptoms are so bad that they just can't get out of bed. So I use my Alexa all the time to remind me of appointments. I have things on my phone. I write things on my refrigerator that I have to walk by because I forget things. And a lot of times I will let people know, hey, if you're only going to give me the option to do this in the afternoon, there's a chance that I may not be able to make it because I may not be able to drive if I'm super bad. So just having those, have those honest conversations with them, and then just be open to different outside of the box treatment. So functional neurologists, functional doctors, neuro rehab specialists, and just kind of thinking that there are other things than just the very black, white, traditional medical systems for survivors to get help.
I'm glad you threw that last bit in. You touched on kind of the alternative, functional med type, treatments in the first episode we did. Just speaking from our lens as a personal injury firm, we do get our fair share of clients that have traumatic brain injuries. Granted, most of those come from vehicular accidents, falls, etc. But oftentimes, we try to get them to what works best, and it can be alternative treatments. But then you run into insurance and whatnot. They don't see that as legitimate treatment quite yet. So there's a lot of work to do when you're talking about whole scope. But I think like I said earlier, we're getting there, and I think people like you out there really just telling your story, being honest, being vulnerable, and just telling it like it is, the wins, the losses, all that, really helps to further everyone's knowledge, and will get us to the point to where we can, together, kind of get our collective heads around this and make some progress. So thank you so much for sharing everything you've shared with us today.
Thank you for, having me. I think that these are very important conversations because, the statistic numbers are going up and there's more of us. And I think there's a lot more that are walking the same journey as me.
Well, everybody, that's going to do it for another amazing episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. Again, I'd love to extend our gratitude and thanks to Paula Walters for joining us here today and really sharing, again, her vast knowledge and her passion for this. Please look for her on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Catch her on her podcast called the Courageous Survivor Podcast. I really hope that our audience has enjoyed being a part of this conversation as much as I have, and you're coming with that deeper understanding of that intersection between domestic violence and brain injury. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to our channel, and to keep up with our latest and greatest content. Leave us a comment today too to let us know what you thought of today's discussion. But as always, remember, if you're in pain, call Shane at 980-999-9999.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.